Welcome to Murder Minute TV. The video you're about to see includes a killer from every state in the United States. This content is not for the faint of heart. Viewer discretion is advised. Today, we're diving into the dark history of some of the most notorious murderers in the United States. Some people get lost along the way. This is their story. Am I the only one that didn't know about the Giggling Granny? They called her the Giggling Granny, a seemingly harmless old woman with a penchant for poison. Nannie Doss was anything but harmless. She took the lives of 11 souls. Picture that same woman slipping arsenic into your coffee with a smile. Driven by a lust for insurance money, she left a trail of grief and devastation. This is gonna blow your mind. In the vast, unforgiving wilderness of Alaska, a different kind of predator stalked its prey. Robert Hansen, the butcher baker, used the isolation to his advantage. He hunted his fellow human beings. Abducting young women, he spirited them away to the remote Alaskan backcountry. There, he would release them, only to hunt them down like animals. I bet you didn't know the desert can be a beautiful place. Quiet, still, almost eternal. But even in the stark beauty of the Arizona desert, darkness can find a foothold. Mark Goudeau, the baseline killer, terrorized Phoenix from August 2005 to June 2006. His crimes included robbery, sexual assault, and murder. 9 lives were lost, chosen seemingly at random. The randomness amplified the terror. Police worked tirelessly, following every lead. And then, it stopped. Goudeau disappeared, leaving a scarred city. But he was apprehended on September 4, 2006, in connection with an SA, and DNA linked him as being the baseline killer. Christmas, a time for joy, for family, for peace. But in 1987, in Russellville, Arkansas, Christmas turned into unimaginable horror. Ronald Gene Simmons unleashed a nightmare on his own family. It began on December 22nd. Over several days, Simmons murdered 14 family members. His weapon of choice, a .22 caliber pistol. Motive, power, control, and resentment. Russellville had never seen such darkness. The community struggled to comprehend the tragedy, exposing the darkness in Russellville. I'm sure you've heard the news. California, the Golden State, land of sunshine, dreams, and nightmares. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, evoked fear and revulsion. From 1984 to 1985, he held Los Angeles in terror. A self-proclaimed Satanist, his crimes were random and brutal. He broke into homes at night, leaving a trail of blood. His calling card? A pentagram in blood. The police faced a cunning and elusive adversary. Ramirez vanished after each attack, paralyzing the city with fear. But he was finally captured in 1985. Exposing the darkness in Colorado, the Rocky Mountains, ski resorts, and a dark secret hidden beneath its scenic beauty. Scott Lee Kimball, once an FBI informant, took a sinister turn. His victims, often close to him, were lured in with promises. Their trust, tragically misplaced, sealed their fate. The rugged terrain of Colorado became his hunting ground. But the mountains hold secrets, and Kimball's crimes would not remain buried forever. He was apprehended March 14, 2006. Are you terrified to travel alone at night? From the peaks of Colorado, we travel eastward to Connecticut, a state known for its charming towns and idyllic landscapes. Yet, even in this picturesque corner, darkness found its way in through Michael Ross, the roadside strangler. Ross's crimes spread fear throughout Connecticut. Young women, full of life, became his victims. He preyed on their vulnerability using deception and force. The roads became places of terror. Ross's reign left an indelible mark on Connecticut. Our journey takes us south to Delaware, known for its coastal beauty. But along Route 40, a dark chapter unfolded. Stephen Brian Pennell, the Route 40 killer, cast a long shadow over the state. His crimes marked a turning point, shattering the illusion of safety. His capture brought relief, but left an enduring scar on Delaware. A chilling reminder that darkness can alter the landscape of innocence. This is gonna blow your mind. In the Sunshine State, beneath the veneer of beaches and citrus groves, darkness festered. Aileen Wuornos emerged from the shadows. Life dealt Wuornos a cruel hand. Abandoned and abused, she drifted into prostitution. Survival morphed into something sinister. 7 men met a violent end. Wuornos claimed self-defense. The jury convicted her and sentenced her to death. I bet you didn't know about the chilling events that gripped Atlanta in the late 1970s and early 1980s. A string of disappearances and murders cast a pall over the community. Fear stalked the streets as the body count grew. In 1981, Wayne Williams was arrested and convicted of 2 of the murders. The Atlanta child murders remain a haunting chapter in American history. What's something people don't know about Hawaii? Even in this paradise of swaying palms and azure waters, evil found a foothold. The Honolulu Strangler shattered the illusion of paradise. Between 1985 and 1986, 5 women fell victim. Their bodies bore signs of sexual assault and strangulation. The island's tranquility was replaced by fear. Despite a massive investigation, the Honolulu Strangler was never caught. There is a suspect we will talk about in the future in another video. But until then, his crimes remain unsolved, a chilling testament to lurking darkness. Are you terrified to walk alone at night? Some men are born under a bad sign. Paul Ezra Rhodes was one such man. He went on a robbing and killing spree from February 28th, March 21st, 1987. 3 murders, 3 innocent lives extinguished, possibly more. He was executed via lethal injection on November 18th, 2011. What's something people don't know about clowns? They say that behind every mask, there's a face. John Wayne Gacy's story began with the painted grin of a clown. But beneath that painted smile, a monster lurked. He murdered at least 33 young men and boys and was executed by lethal injection on May 10th, 1994. You are not going to believe this. The Heartland of America, a place where life is supposed to be simple. But even here, evil finds a way. Herb Baumeister harbored a terrible secret. He was the I-70 Strangler. He murdered at least 11 men along Interstate 70, 8 of which were found buried in the gravel of his backyard. Herb Baumeister died by suicide after he learned a warrant was issued for his arrest. I bet you didn't know the Heartland of America, often associated with rolling farmlands and quiet living. But even in the Heartland, darkness can take root. Dustin Lee Honkin murdered 4 people in cold blood, including 2 children in Iowa, because he discovered that one of his drug dealer cohorts had turned state witness against him. While out on bond, Honkin located the man, his girlfriend, and her 2 children and killed them. Then not long after that, the 5th victim, also a former dealer, was murdered as well. Dustin was formally sentenced to death on October 11, 2005. Dustin Lee Honkin was executed on July 17, 2020, exposing the darkness in the Heartland. Kansas, the Heartland of America, a place where folks value their peace and quiet. But even in the vast plains, darkness can find a home. For over 30 years, the shadow of Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, loomed large over the state. He didn't just take lives, he toyed with his victims and the police. For a community, the thought of a monster lurking in their midst is terrifying enough. But the reality of that monster being a seemingly ordinary neighbor adds a whole other layer of horror. I bet you didn't know Kentucky holds a dark secret. Donald Harvey, a name that sends chills down the spines of those who remember. He was a self-proclaimed angel of death, a hospital orderly who betrayed trust. Imagine being at your most vulnerable, seeking care in a hospital. Now imagine the person entrusted with your well-being intends harm. That was the reality for those who crossed paths with Donald Harvey. Harvey claimed 87 lives, many of whom were patients. He exploited the vulnerable, preying on those fighting for their lives. He got away with his evil deeds for 17 years. Then his past finally caught up to him. He was brought in for questioning and admitted to one of his murders. He took a plea bargain and admitted to more murders so that he could get life in prison instead of the death penalty. On March 29, 2017, he was found beaten in his cell so badly he died the next day, on March 30th. I don't think people understand the darkness that can hide in the bayou. Down in Louisiana, where the bayou whispers secrets and the Spanish moss hangs heavy with humidity, there walked a man who embodied the darkness hidden beneath the surface. Ronald Dominique, known as the Bayou Strangler, preyed on the vulnerable, luring young men struggling with addiction and homelessness to their deaths. Dominique confessed to the murders of at least 23 men, their bodies often dumped in canals and ditches. The story of Ronald Dominique is a chilling reminder that evil can lurk in the most unexpected places. I'm sure you've heard the news. Maine, with its rugged coastline, evokes peace and tranquility, but darkness can take root. James Hicks harbored a terrifying secret. His crimes cast a shadow over Maine. He targeted strangers, ending their journeys. 3 women lost their lives. Hicks' crimes left an indelible scar on Maine. I bet you didn't know Baltimore, Maryland, a city with a rich history, also bears the scars of darkness. Joseph Metheny spread fear through his brutal crimes. He reveled in the macabre, reflecting a disturbing fascination with death. His victims became pawns in his twisted game. Metheny confessed to killing 13 people. His chilling confessions offered a glimpse into a mind consumed by darkness. Baltimore was left reeling, forever changed by his reign of terror. Exposing the dark history of the Boston Strangler. Now let's talk about Albert DeSalvo. Some folks called him the Measuring Man. He'd knock on doors, claiming to be from a modeling agency, but that was just a front. 13 women were found strangled. Panic gripped the city. DeSalvo confessed, but doubts remain. He was later killed in prison. The shadow of the Boston Strangler still hangs over Massachusetts. I bet you didn't know Michigan has its own notorious serial killer. Here we meet Carl Eugene Watts, the Sunday morning slasher. He went by Coral Watts and was a whirlwind of violence, striking quickly and brutally. He confessed to 12 murders, but some say it could be over 80. Watts died in prison in 2007, but the scars he left never truly heal. What's something people don't know about Minnesota? In the heart of the Midwest, a different kind of darkness emerged. A chilling voice choked with remorse haunted the night. This was Paul Michael Stephanie, the weepy-voiced killer. He terrorized the Twin Cities, attacking women. His brutal crimes were fueled by twisted rage. After each attack, he'd call the police, his voice thick with regret. Stephanie's reign of terror ended in 1989, sentenced to 40 years in prison. He was later diagnosed with cancer in 1997 and confessed to 3 more murders. Stephanie later died in prison in 1998 of skin cancer. I bet you didn't know about Glenn Rogers, the cross-country killer, a drifter leaving a trail of pain and sorrow. Born in Ohio? Not surprising. Death followed him from state to state. In 1995, he committed a hideous murder in Mississippi, and that is why he is listed under this state. But his victims, often women, were scattered across the map. Convicted of several murders, Rogers remains on death row in Florida. I bet you didn't know about the Kansas City Butcher. From the back roads and byways, we travel to Missouri, to a city haunted by whispers of unspeakable acts. It's here, in Kansas City, that we encounter Robert Berdella, the Kansas City Butcher. Berdella preyed on young men, luring them back to his home. Inside that house of horrors, Berdella would torture his victims for days. Berdella died in prison in 1992, but the scars he left on Kansas City remain. Exposing the darkness in Montana's beauty. We journey now to Montana, a land of rugged beauty with a darker side. Here we meet Wayne Nance, the Missoula Mauler. Nance was a predator preying on the innocent. His victims disappeared without a trace. Suspected in 6 murders, his reign ended during a struggle. Shot and killed, Nance left behind unanswered questions. What's something people don't know about the heartland of America, often associated with rolling hills and peaceful living? It holds its own dark secrets. In Nebraska, the case of John Joubert sent shockwaves through the state. Joubert's crimes targeted young boys, shaking the community to its core. His reign of terror began in the early 1980s. With 3 or more victims, he was sentenced to death. He was executed by electric chair on July 17, 1996. Am I the only one that didn't know the neon lights of Las Vegas often overshadow the darker aspects of human nature? Like the chilling case of Gerald and Charlene Gallego? This couple embarked on a terrifying killing spree across several states. Their crimes shocked a nation accustomed to sensational headlines. They preyed on young women, subjecting them to unimaginable horrors. Their reign of terror exposed the dark underbelly of a glittering city. This is going to blow your mind. New Hampshire, known for its picturesque landscapes and charming towns, contrasts sharply with the brutal crimes of Gary Sampson. His name is a chilling reminder that evil can intrude even in idyllic settings. Sampson's random, violent crimes spread fear across state lines. The community grappled with senseless tragedy. In 2001, he carjacked and murdered innocent victims. Law enforcement's desperate pursuit ended in his capture, but the wounds of his brutal crimes remain. Are you shocked to learn about the darkness lurking in the Garden State? Charles Cullen, a seemingly ordinary nurse, harbored a sinister secret. He was a silent predator within the very walls meant to heal and protect. Over 16 years, he moved from hospital to hospital, leaving a trail of victims. His weapon of choice was lethal injections. Cullen preyed on the vulnerable, extinguishing their lives with cold precision. His actions shocked a nation and left families forever haunted. I don't think people understand the dark history hidden in New Mexico. The land of enchantment, a place of vast deserts and ancient beauty, also holds a dark side. David Parker Ray, known as the Toy Box Killer, carried out horrific crimes here. He operated from a soundproof trailer he called his toy box. Inside, he subjected his victims to unimaginable torture. Ray took his secrets to the grave, leaving a legacy of pain and fear. Are you terrified to walk the streets at night? New York City, the city that never sleeps, found itself gripped by terror in the summer of 1976. A phantom stalked the streets, leaving a trail of fear and bloodshed. His name was David Berkowitz, but to the city, he was the son of Sam. Armed with a .44 caliber revolver, Berkowitz launched random attacks, targeting young couples. As the body count rose, so did the panic. The city held its breath, desperate for answers. I was shocked that I didn't know about the Taco Bell Strangler. Some folks say you can see evil in a man's eyes. But with Henry Louis Wallace, it was more like he lulled you into a false sense of security. He was quiet, polite even. Folks in his Charlotte neighborhood knew him, trusted him. But beneath that veneer of normalcy, a darkness festered. Between 1990 and 1994, he preyed on young women. He was a manager at Taco Bell, and they called him the Taco Bell Strangler. He preyed on women he worked with. Each victim was more than just a name in a police report. They were daughters, sisters, friends. Wallace's capture brought some closure, but the wounds ran deep. The city of Charlotte carries the weight of his crimes, a sobering reminder of the darkness in the human heart. Here is an old story you may not have known about. North Dakota history harbors a dark secret. North Dakota, the Peace Garden State. Wide open spaces, quiet towns. But even in the Heartland, darkness can take root. Out in a lonely farmhouse lived Eugene Butler, a quiet farmer. Nobody suspected the horrors hidden beneath the surface. Butler was a predator, a killer who preyed on the vulnerable. After Butler's passing, the truth began to unravel. Bones, remnants of lives brutally taken, pointed to a killer. If you saw our other video about Ohio, then you probably know about the House of Horrors on Imperial Avenue, Cleveland, Ohio, a city of resilience, of hard-working people. But even in a bustling city, shadows can linger. Anthony Sowell, the Cleveland Strangler, committed unspeakable crimes. The House of Horrors stood, unassuming. Inside that house, a nightmare unfolded. 11 women, their lives stolen, their bodies discarded. Neighbors complained about a smell, but it was ignored. And so, the killing continued. The discovery sent shock waves through Cleveland. How could such depravity occur, unnoticed? Sowell was arrested and sentenced to the death penalty, but fought it as he felt he did not receive a fair trial due to media coverage. He died in a prison hospital on February 8, 2021 of a terminal illness. Are you terrified to discover the darkness lurking in the heartland of America? Roger Dale Stafford brought terror to Oklahoma. His crimes culminated in the horrific Sirloin Stockade murders. He and his brother and his wife went into a restaurant and made all of the 6 employees go into the meat freezer and killed them all. He was sentenced to death on October 17, 1979, and he was then executed on July 1, 1995. I will never look at the open road the same way after learning this. The open road, a symbol of freedom, became a hunting ground for Randall Woodfield, the I-5 killer. He preyed on the vulnerable, their dreams shattered by his brutality. Woodfield's reign of terror left a trail of fear and despair. His victims, often young women, became tragic stories. For years he evaded capture, a phantom moving in the shadows, the I-5 killer. The fear he instilled in the Pacific Northwest was horrifying. He was arrested in March 1981 and still serving life plus 125 years in Oregon State Penitentiary. Did you ever hear about horrors that unfolded in Philadelphia? Gary Heidnik created a nightmare within his home. The basement became a dungeon of unimaginable suffering. Heidnik preyed on the vulnerable, trapping them in his twisted world. He held them captive, subjecting them to unspeakable acts. He was arrested in 1987 and tried to hang himself in his cell. On July 1, 1988, he was sentenced to death and again attempted suicide by overdosing on Thorazine. Heidnik was executed on July 6, 1999. Sometimes evil takes root in the shadows, waits to show its face. Craig Price, 14 years old, started young, stabbed a woman to death, a mother and her daughters. Caught, he was arrested when he was 15 years old, tried, and convicted as a minor, meaning he would be released when he turned 21. But because of crimes he committed at the Rhode Island Training School, he was sentenced to an additional 10 to 25 years and is now serving his sentence at the Union Correctional Institution, Rayford, Florida. Here is some really dark history of the Low Country. Down in South Carolina, a place they call the Low Country, Donald Henry Gaskins. They called him Pee-wee because he was 5'5" and 130 pounds. And let me tell you, he was a monster of the worst kind. He confessed to over 100 murders and was sentenced to death. But even then, he was able to murder another prisoner right before he was to be put to death. He was horrifying. Donald Pee-wee Gaskins, you may want to look him up as there is not even enough time here to explain now how hideous his acts were. He died on September 6, 1991. Execution by electrocution. I bet you didn't know South Dakota has its own chilling secrets. South Dakota, a land of wide open spaces where the wind whispers across the plains. But even in this vast landscape, some secrets are buried deep. Robert Leroy Anderson. His story is chilling. Convicted of murder, kidnapping, and rape. He was arrested, then told a cellmate about his crimes in detail, and that prisoner then struck a deal with police exchanging information for a shorter sentence. But the information led the police to the evidence they needed to convict Anderson. He received the death sentence April 9, 1999, but on March 30, 2003, he committed suicide. You need to hear this if you're a fast food lover. Some crimes leave an indelible mark, not just for their brutality, but for the ordinary settings in which they unfold. Paul Dennis Reed, the fast food killer, brought terror to the mundane routine of grabbing a burger and fries. His spree began in February 1997, targeting fast food restaurants in Nashville. Reed's reign of fear claimed 7 lives, shaking the community to its core. Why are there not more people talking about the Houston horrors? Some stories are so dark, so evil, that they defy our understanding. The case of Dean Corll, the Candy Man of Houston, Texas, is one such story. His name, forever linked to the abduction, torture, and murder of at least 28 young boys in the 1970s. Corll had a couple of teen accomplices who were eventually going to be tortured and murdered themselves. One of them grabbed Corll's gun, shot him 6 times, and killed him. Corll's crimes sent shockwaves through Houston and beyond. What's something people don't know about Ted Bundy? Few names resonate with the same chilling familiarity as Ted Bundy. His crimes shattered the illusion of safety. Bundy's reign of terror began in the Pacific Northwest in the early 1970s. Luring young women with his charm, he left a trail of grief and unanswered questions. Utah became another hunting ground for Bundy, adding to the growing list of victims. Bundy's capture in 1978 marked the beginning of a long legal battle. His story, a chilling reminder that evil can wear a human face. You need to hear this if you're a true crime enthusiast. Some stories linger like a chill wind off a mountain lake. The Connecticut River Valley Killer, 7 murders, maybe more. Each one a tragedy, a family left to grieve. From 1979 to 1989, this land held its breath. Mostly young women, lives taken in an instant. The killer, a shadow, never caught. Years have passed, but questions remain. I bet you didn't know about the terror that gripped Richmond, Virginia in 1987. Brutal murders gripped the city. Young women, their lives taken. The Southside Strangler stalked the night. Timothy Spencer, the prime suspect, couldn't escape the mounting evidence. DNA technology linked him to the crimes. The trial was a media sensation. Justice was served. Spencer's reign ended on death row, but the memory of his victims haunts the South Side. You need to hear this if you're a true crime enthusiast. Sometimes the face of evil is disarmingly ordinary. Gary Ridgway, a quiet presence. He was the Green River Killer, hunting in the Seattle area. Young women disappeared, their bodies found along the Green River. The case consumed authorities, one of the largest in U.S. history. DNA technology finally caught him, exposing the darkness in the heart of West Virginia. Some folks are driven by a darkness you just can't explain. Joseph Paul Franklin was one of those folks. He was fueled by pure, unadulterated hate. Born in Alabama, Franklin drifted through life, a storm cloud of anger. He joined hate groups, places where prejudice festered. He appointed himself judge, jury, and executioner. His crimes were about sending a message. Why are there not more people talking about Jeffrey Dahmer? Jeffrey Dahmer was one of those hidden monsters. Behind the seemingly normal facade was a darkness so deep, so depraved. He wasn't just a killer. Jeffrey Dahmer was a monster in human skin. Dahmer's reign of terror ended in 1991. What they found in that apartment shocked the world. I don't think people understand the darkness that can take root even in the most serene places. Wyoming, land of majestic mountains, sprawling plains, and a silence so profound it can feel almost sacred. But even here, darkness can take root. Dale Wayne Eaton, a man with a troubled past, brought that darkness in 1988. A young woman on a road trip disappeared. In 2002, a break in the case. The young woman's car was found on Eaton's property. She had been kidnapped, raped, and murdered. Eaton was convicted and sentenced to the death penalty, but that was later overturned, and he is still in prison to this day. Was justice served? You be the judge of that. It is a chilling reminder that evil can lurk anywhere. From bustling cities to quiet back roads, we've uncovered the dark underbelly of the American dream. Thank you for delving into this study of 50 killers, one from each state, brought to you by Murder Minute TV. We hope you found it as chilling as it was enlightening. Stay tuned for more terrifying videos to come. Please like and subscribe, and let us know in the comments if you want any long-form videos on a particular state or deep dives into the minds of specific serial killers. Remember, stay vigilant, and as always, until next time,